Hi, I'm Tamez, and today I'm really excited to bring you a really fast, easy idea for decorating cupcakes for Valentine's Day. And what I'm going to be doing is covering these in fondant and using one of these nice little silicone molds and pressing out some heart shapes, and then tinting the fondant before I press it into the mold, and then dusting it with a little bit of these powdered colors that are really fun and a lot of nice dimension to your products. So to get started, all you need are some cupcakes, and I just have a couple to show, but you would go ahead and make 24 or however many you want. And for this project I like to put on gloves because when you are working with food coloring and food, it's important to keep everything safe, especially with the food coloring. You don't want any of that to get on your skin and stay there, because it will. So just keep it on the gloves. So when you're all ready to go, and you have gloves on, and you're good to go, and everything is nice, what you can do is just trim the tops off your cupcakes, because you don't need that. You're going to be setting them down flat, and you don't want them to be toppling over. So just using the cupcake paper as a guide, trim off the top. And take off your little paper. And uncover your frosting. Get your little offset spatula and set your cupcake on a little piece of parchment paper. And this is just to help keep everything all nice and clean. And go ahead, and it's a good idea whenever you're working with frosting or buttercream to make sure and you whip it a little bit, just stir it around to get it to a nice spreadable consistency, just to see what's going on. Make sure it's upside down. And then what you're going to do is just spread a nice even but thin layer of buttercream all over this cupcake. And sometimes helps to pick it up in your hand, and you don't have to worry about this being a very pretty layer of frosting. It just needs to cover the entire exterior. And if this was a chocolate cake or a red velvet or something like that, you would want to make sure that the white frosting covered all of the cake, so that when you put on the layer of fondant, that none of that color from the cake shows underneath or through the fondant, because sometimes that can happen. And there. Now I'm always moving to different pieces of parchment paper, because when you're working with fondant, you don't want to get any of that sticky frosting onto the fondant, because it really will show. It'll look like a little grease spot, and that's not what you want. So you can always switch out your gloves and try and work on a nice clean surface. Little pieces of parchment paper are really good for this. So next, what I'm going to do is just slide on these gloves. Alright, and so once you have your gloves on, you're ready to tint some of your fondant. And this fondant comes in a nice little package, but it's always a good idea to keep it wrapped in plastic wrap. If you're not using it all at once, just go ahead and make sure you don't have any frosting on your knife. We are going to cut off a little piece of this fondant. And we're going to cover the cake with that little bit. And we'll just keep it covered with a little piece of plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out. And then I'm going to cut another little piece for the hearts, the heart molds. So make sure you keep that covered well. But when you're coloring fondant, what you want to make sure and use is gel food colorings, because liquid water-based food colorings will actually dissolve the fondant over time. So it's always a good idea, gel food colorings only. But just dip a little bit. And like I said, it's always a good idea to be working with gloves, because this stuff does stain. But just knead it in, and go ahead and cap your food coloring before you get yourself all red. Now for this, since we're going to be using this right away, we can just leave that uncovered. But go ahead and take your little mold, and what I'm going to be doing is using the little hearts right at the top, the little pair of two. Just go ahead and dust it with a little bit of cornstarch and powdered sugar. And this is a sachet, just a little piece of cheesecloth, and inside is a mixture of cornstarch and powdered sugar, about 50-50. And then take a little brush and dust any excess away, because that helps to release the fondant or the gum paste, whichever one you choose to use, but for this one I'm using fondant. It stays nice and soft. Don't need this to harden at all, so gum paste you really don't need to use here. But just go ahead and take your mold and press that fondant right in there. And use the edge of the mold itself, some pressure from your fingers to actually cut away. And then to release these, you just kind of shake the mold and pop it out. And it's that easy. So just go ahead and lay that to the side and go ahead and make your next one. How cute is that? Perfect. 2 little hearts. Just what you want. So then you can get rid of your mold and get rid of this pink, but you should save it so that you can make all the other ones. I'm going to remove my gloves because I don't want to get any of my white fondant pink. And wipe down my surface just to make sure, and that's one thing about fondant and gum paste. If you're rolling it out and your surface isn't perfectly clean, it will show up on the dough. So next what I'm going to do is just roll out my fondant nice and thin. I'm putting down a little bit of cornstarch and powdered sugar to help give some traction, and also to stop the fondant from sticking to the cutting board, because that's never any fun. Just go ahead and push that down. Flatten out a little bit. And you're always moving the fondant. I'm getting it nice and thin, a little bit thinner than 1/8 of an inch. And then go ahead and take it and lay it right on top of your cupcake. Make sure you don't have any frosting or anything on your fingers. But now what you're going to do is just work this down. And believe it or not, the warmth from your fingers is a good thing here. There. And now you can, with an X-Acto knife if you have one, and an X-Acto knife is a really good thing to have for this. It's always a good idea to have a set of X-Acto knives that you have dedicated to food crafting. Because that way you know these are always going to be just fine. But just go in with a little X-Acto knife and trim away right up to the edge any excess. And go ahead and pull it away. And you can save that, and if you have missed any, go ahead and go on for the second and final trimming. Perfect. And now what you're going to do is take your little hearts that you created and take some of the red food color dust. And I love these dusts. It's a nice little effect. But especially when you have tinted the fondant beforehand, it really does add a nice additional bit of color. So just going and take some and just gingerly touch it here and there. You can go ahead and take it. Place it right on top. But first, you should always put a little dab of buttercream or something just to help this decoration stick with. And I think the other little one will go perfect And there you have it. A nice, simple, easy, beautiful cupcake that I think anybody would like to see set up for Valentine's Day. And I hope you try it. Really easy.